Think on These Things 3. Welcome to QX Church, Pastor Scott Conway, and we are on the third lesson of the Think on These Things series. In the first lesson, we talked about think, logizomai, and we're using that word completely unpacked to dive into each one of these other terms. Last time, we talked about whatsoever things are true. This week, we're talking about whatsoever things are honest. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, the famous think on these things passage. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. If there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Whatsoever things are honest, semnos. The honest word is semnos. Now we translate it as honest, but it's really a much more robust word than just honest. We'll be focusing on the honesty aspect of it, but let's look at more of the totality of its meaning. It means august, venerable, revered, to be venerated for character, honorable, grave, honest. Modern culture does not always appreciate something like this. While we translate the word honest, obviously it has all these other meanings. Honest is actually truly what it means, so that is a proper translation. But these august, venerable, revered, to be venerated for character, honorable, grave, is also part of semnos. So let's look at some of these other aspects of the meaning before we dive into the honest part. August, venerable, and revered. August is inspiring admiration. It's majestic, supreme dignity. Thus we had Caesar Augustus. We have the month of August named after him. August. Inspiring admiration, majestic, supreme dignity. So whatsoever things are inspiring admiration, think on these things. Whatsoever things are majestic, think on these things. Whatsoever things are of supreme dignity, think on these things. Venerable. Venerable is commanding respect because of age and experience. Or it can also be impressive dignity, high office, noble character. Venerable, worthy of being venerated. Now, venerable very often connects to the ancient. Venerable connects to the very, very old. In fact, for people, if you're talking about people, you might have young, middle age, old, and at some point you're old enough that you might be considered venerable, and that you've been around, been there, done that, seen that, your experience, your observation from a lifetime, that it commands respect. When I was young, one of the things that connects me to history isn't just what I've lived. I've lived history since the mid-60s. More specifically, I've been alive for history since the mid-60s. But as I was growing up, there were people that were born, of course, in the 40s, my parents, the 30s, the 20s, that I talked to a lot. I heard stories of America before the frontier closed. That you hear stories, secondhand stories of old women who remember being told the stories by their mothers and grandmothers of the era during the fight for the women's vote. Talking to people who remember the Great Depression, who remember talking to World War I vets who didn't ever seem to want to say anything about the war. People who lived through World War II, fought in Korea, fought in Vietnam. People who remember where they were when JFK was shot. People who remember the cultural shift of the 60s and the 70s. And in fact, I would have so many conversations with some of these people that one woman in particular who was born in 1930 would consistently forget that I'm not her age, I wasn't there. Because we could have such open, easy conversations about life in the 40s and the 50s, and that I had developed such an understanding of those times, largely just because of these conversations, that I seemed to have so much familiarity with it because I listened. Not because I was there, but because I listened to the people who were. That's venerating someone. They have the age, they have the experience. Talking to people about the shift in life over the course of decades. Right now we have a generation that's grown up, doesn't remember a world before 9/11. That we have the kids in high school now were born after 9/11. The college kids were toddlers. So they don't remember that world. Even for those of us who are older. A lot of us don't remember a disconnected world, a pre-internet world, a pre-home computer world. You know, I remember owning an encyclopedia set. You wanted to know something, you went to the encyclopedia set. That was one of the big investments in a household. That your big investment was you buy a house. Probably your second biggest investment is you buy a car. Your third biggest investment is you buy a hi-fi. That might be a $5,000 audio system. And that's what it took to play the radio and to play records and to have that premium system back then. And right around number 4 might be the household encyclopedia set. Well, all that's kind of quaint right now. Having to go to the library and know how to use the card catalog. Venerable, commanding respect because of age and experience. Been around. Been tested by time. Seen stuff, experienced stuff. Talked to the people who were there. Venerable. Revered. To regard with respect, tinged by awe. To revere someone or something. You show respect. But there's a little bit of awe in that. That it's a little bit more than just, well, of course you show respect. You show respect for everyone. You show respect for everything. Revered is like this heightened level. This appreciation that there's something special about this. At a different level than the everything special. And to revere. When you put all this together, great dignity. Great dignity is probably a good way to translate this concept. There's an implication of age, an implication of being time-tested, an implication of having weathered the years, the decades, the generations. These are things that modern culture doesn't often spend a great deal of time considering. Often now, it's the newest, brightest, shiniest things that capture attention. It's fads and trends that command consideration. The new thing and what's going to be the next new thing that commands deliberation and debate. Not much time is invested culturally. Individually, people do it. Culturally, the culture doesn't invest a lot of time in the time-tested. It doesn't invest a lot of time in the eternal. It doesn't invest a lot of time in the principle-level fundamentals. Thus, this is a thing we have to choose to do on our own. We have to choose to look to the principles, the eternal, the long-term. We have to choose to consider the venerable. We have to choose to connect with the things that have already been demonstrated, proven, tested over time. We have to choose because our culture doesn't choose it for us. When the things that you need to do align with your culture, that basically means society is going to help drive you in that direction. There was a time, really not that many generations ago, where finishing high school meant you were educated. My grandfather, who died about a decade ago, I suppose now. Has it really been that long? It probably hasn't been that long. It's always hard to tell. But he graduated from high school. He graduated from high school right around World War II. He graduated from high school at a time where only 1 out of 3 people finished high school. By comparison, we have more than 1 out of 3 finishing college today. Back then, graduating high school, it wasn't the cultural norm. It's not like everybody finished high school. So if you were going to finish high school, you almost had to decide to go finish high school. Kind of like today, if you're going to finish college, you kind of have to decide to go finish college. There's more and more social pressure to go to college, but when it comes to getting your associates, getting your college or your bachelor's degree, there's less pressure to finish it, to just do it. But even as much as that is today, it was much less, even for high school back then, you had to decide. But what was true for everyone, now for generations, has been everyone should learn to read and write. Well, it wasn't too many generations before my grandfather graduated from high school that there wasn't this cultural imperative that everybody should know how to read and write and do math. Now there is. Now it's almost unfathomable in American culture that an adult doesn't know how to read and write and do math. The culture drives you in that direction. You don't need to decide if you're going to do it. The culture is going to drive you there. If you don't want to do it, you have to decide, I'm not going to learn how to read, I'm not going to learn how to write, I'm not going to learn how to do math, because the culture makes you do that. When the culture is helping you do a thing, all you have to kind of do is just go with the flow, just don't fight it. But the culture today is going to drive you toward more momentary things. The culture today is going to drive you to more modern things, new ideas. Everything needs to be new. Everything needs to be different. And it's not going to think about unintended consequences. It's not going to think about principles. It's not going to think about time tests. It's not going to think generationally. Those are things we have to decide to do for ourselves. Modern society doesn't tend to think in terms of natural systems, unless you live in the country. If you live in the country, well, you grow up with natural systems. There's a planting season, there's a harvest season, you have to take care of your crops during the year. There's no way to cram for it. There's no room for theory, because if your theory is wrong, everything's gone. Everything has to be practical, everything has to work. You can't just go try some newfangled thing because it's the newfangled thing. You need to know. But with city life, there's a lot of room for experimentation. There's a lot of room for the new thing, because honestly, we're largely disconnected from natural systems in the real world. An exception being athletes. Athletes, people who do things with their body, because the human body is a natural system. I can't just wake up this morning and decide, I saw a picture of a bodybuilder. I want to have that body. So if I lift weights this afternoon, I can hit the beach tomorrow, right? Well, I could hit the beach tomorrow, but I am not going to look like the man in the magazine. Bodies like that don't get built in a day. So athletes tend to connect to natural systems. Athletes tend to connect to like long-term things. But even then, when you're dealing with athletics, sometimes we get so fixated on how do I get the best performance in the shortest amount of time without testing the basic idea of, well, I do want to live to be 70. And I want to be able to be up and about and moving around. And if possible, it'd be nice to have my own knees. It'd be nice to have my own hips. Maybe I might balance out athletic performance with the fact that I want to be healthy and fit as I get older. But that's like an ancient martial arts thing. where you have like the 80-year-old Chinese kung fu masters still practicing their kung fu. The 90 and even 100-year-old kung fu masters still moving, still kicking head height. Because it's a different way of thinking. It's venerable, it's time-tested. Then we have this other concept of honorable and grave. Ooh, that sounds bad, grave. Especially since right now we're so close to Halloween. You go, ooh, I'm thinking that's a Halloween word, grave. Honorable and grave. Honorable includes being characterized by principles, being distinguished, being a credit to your class, being upright. Now, what do we mean by a credit to your class? I mean, we have phrases, and you know, what we mean by class is like however you're defining a group. Where we say something like, well, you're a credit to your sex, or you're a credit to your race, or you're a credit to your age, or you're a credit to your school, or you're a credit to your country, or you're a credit to your company. Basically, all it means is that you exemplify the best of whatever category you might be representing there. Being a credit to something. And the idea there is if everybody in that class of people was like you, that would be awesome. Then grave. Grave is serious, solemn, sober. Now, building off, I guess, venerable and revered, we continue with the idea here of great dignity. The sober part of grave reminds us that even when others are caught up in emotion, whether driven by drink, like literally not sober, or a frenzy of emotion, that an honorable, grave person keeps their wits about them. That they can make very clear-headed, sober decisions, clear-headed, sober analyses of what's really going on and of the implications of it. They separate themselves from the emotion of moments to still see the world, to evaluate, and to think based upon principles and sound judgment. Think on these things. Whatsoever things are honorable, whatsoever things are grave, whatsoever things are characterized by principles, think on these things. Whatsoever things are distinguished, whatsoever things bring credit to a class or a group, the best exemplify the highest, best, and noblest ideals of what this group or class of people could be like. Not necessarily ought to be like, but could be like. Think on these things. Whatever is upright, whatever is serious, whatever is solemn, whatever is sober. Think on these things. Semnos is a pretty interesting word that reminds us of some pretty interesting things. That in the days of my grandfather being a child, some of my most elderly friends being a child, might have been pretty self-evident. For those who live in the country, might be pretty self-evident. I mean, there are things you can do on a farm to wipe out your soil in 5 years. There are things you can do on a farm to wipe out your orchards. There are things you can do on a farm to wipe out your vineyard. You have to think long-term. You have to think seasonally. Year after year, generation after generation of crops, generation after generation of your herds, season after season of your orchards. Country life is different. City life, it's easy to ignore these things. So we have to decide. We have to decide. So now whatsoever things are honest, think on these things. Now this is the word that we translated at. This is where our focus is going to be. And so what's honest? Well, at the basic level, honest is truth-telling. So whatsoever things are truth-telling, think on these things. Whatsoever things have truth-telling, good intentions. Someone who's honest is usually trying to, they have good intentions. They want to make sure you know the things you need to know. Fair, sincere, frank, genuine, truthful. All these are like wrapped up in this honest, an honest person. A key here is to remember an honest person may not always be right. Now this is one of the toughest things sometimes to deal with, honesty. Is if I am being honest with you, I am telling you the truth. That doesn't mean I'm right. It means I'm telling you the truth as far as I know it to be true. Maybe I'm wrong. I may sincerely believe that what I'm saying is true. So I'm sincere, but it doesn't mean I'm correct. I may have been taught incorrectly. I may have been taught a point of view. So if you understand an honest person, an honest, sincere person, could still be wrong. It doesn't mean they're dishonest. It doesn't mean they're lying. It means they're mistaken. They could truly tell a truth as they believe a thing to be true, and be both sincerely honest and incorrect. This may both be about the facts as they know them. That's one thing. They're just misinformed. They don't know. They thought they knew, but they don't know. They were misinformed. They misunderstood. They learned it wrong. They heard it wrong. They got it wrong. But here's another part sometimes that's hard to deal with. Not only are honest people potentially mistaken about the facts, potentially mistaken about what the facts mean, they could also be mistaken about their plans as they intended them. That they really did mean what they said when they said it. They were being completely honest. Their understanding of what the future would hold, of what they would do, of what they could do, of what they would remember to do, was different than how it actually played out. Honest people may have plans and just not be able to pull them off. Now, I have some things I plan to do next month. Will I actually be able to pull it off? One of them is I want to go to Disneyland. Sounds simple enough. Hop in the car, drive up to Disneyland. But Disneyland's kind of expensive. And at the moment, I don't have the money for it. Will I make it? Well, it's not a super huge stretch, so the chances are high I'll be able to make it. But what if I don't? Does that mean I lied about going to Disneyland? I lied about my intent? No, of course not. It just means as things unfolded, turned out I couldn't do what I thought I could do. Something came up, and that happens sometimes. Something comes up, something interferes, something interrupts. So honest people may have plans and just not be able to pull them off. Honest people are just as prone to forgetting things as anybody else. Where they said they would do something, and they forgot. It's actually a joke concept, and it got through the grant writing process, and it was meant as a sociological joke. But the funny thing is I found great utility in this sociological joke, so I actually used the term. The term is called cognitive grubility. And it was a joke term made up by a sociology professor when he was a grad student making a proposal for a study. But what cognitive grubility is, it's a thing we all do so we can connect with it. And cognitive grubility is when you're on your way to do one thing and something else catches your attention. And so you go do that thing and something else catches your attention and then you go do the other thing. And you never really get to the other things that you were originally planning on doing because you got distracted. I mean, think about any conversation you've had where you realize what you're talking about has nothing to do with what you were talking about 20 minutes ago. And you're trying to figure out, how did we get on this subject? And if you can recall, you might go, okay, so we talked a little bit about this, and then something got said that then jumped us over to there, and then that jumped us over, and that jumped us over. And while we were talking about this, that reminded me of another story that, oh, okay, I know how we got here. But that's cognitive grubility, where you just pop around. Is it very easy to forget things in the middle of that? Absolutely. I might be on my way to go do dishes. And on my way to go do dishes, I said, like, oh, wait, no, this is left out. I need to pick this up and put that away. And I go to put it away, and I said, like, oh, while I'm picking up the dishes, oh, that TV remote doesn't belong there. And I go to move the TV remote. And when I go to put the TV remote away, I might see something else that's like, oh, well, that doesn't belong there. And I go to put that in the other place. And when I go to put it in the other place, I see something, oh, that reminds me, I have a load of laundry. And I head off to go deal with my load of laundry. And when I go to the garage to do the load of laundry and switch it from the washer to the dryer, I see the car, and I say, oh, that's right, the car needs... And then I totally forget the dishes I was going to do. And then someone walks in the kitchen and says, honey, that you said you were going to do the dishes. And my brain is, I didn't. Oh, I didn't do them. Because I got lost in the cognitive ribaldry of it all. So honest people are just as prone to forgetting things as anyone else. Honest people are just as prone to not being able to pull off plans as anybody else. It doesn't mean they're dishonest, that means they forget. It doesn't mean they're dishonest, it means they couldn't pull it off. Now, a dishonest person will also say they're going to do something and not do it because they had no intention of doing it. That's different. An honest person, when you bring to their attention, well, you said you were going to do this. Oh, yeah, I did, didn't I? And then they'll try to do it. Or they will ask to be released or some such. A dishonest person is someone who will say they're going to do something, and they know they're not going to do it. They'll say they plan something with you, and they know they're not intending to show up. They're not actually committing to it. They're just trying to get out of the moment of the conversation. They're trying to get some credit now for something that they know they're not actually going to do, but they know you might be excited about it. So they're going to get some points right now. But the plans are a lie. They have no intention of actually doing them. That's dishonest. But honest people can say they're going to do something and really mean they're going to do something, and then they just can't pull it off. Or they'll say something and they'll forget, and the dishes don't get done until you remind them. Another thing about honesty isn't just if they are correct or incorrect. It's what truth is being told. Now, this might sound odd. What do you mean, what truth is being told? Well, we'll use the Bible for this one. The Bible is true. We treat the Bible as true. However, it's not always literally true. For instance, when it says, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, 2 Corinthians 16:9. It does not literally mean that there are eyeballs flying around the world. It doesn't mean that if we could track this by satellite, if we could find God's eyeballs, we know where God's looking right now. That it's an idiom. It's not literally true that there are eyes flying around the world. It's an idiom that talks about looking at everything, not just seeing it, but looking at everything. And we understand that truth includes idioms. Truth can include poetic compliments. Truth allows for poetic language. Truth allows for parables. Truth allows for metaphors. Just as someone who gives a poetic compliment or uses a bit of hyperbole when speaking could still be honest and truthful. I was watching one time a young man was balanced up on top of one of those exercise balls. And someone basically scared him off the ball. And I was balanced up there, I was on top of the world. That was, you're a dishonest person. You are not on top of the world. You're on top of a balance ball. And you go, like, that's silly. We all know what he meant. He's talking about an emotional state. He's using poetic language. It doesn't mean he's a dishonest kid. The truth he is expressing is an emotional truth. Or the truth someone's expressing is just being expressed with poetic language. Or the truth someone's expressing is using a little bit of hyperbole. Like when you say that, oh, Mommy, I love you. You're the greatest mommy in the whole world. And you're like, well, my dishonest child says I'm the greatest parent in the entire world. My child doesn't know every parent in the entire world. My child hasn't done this. There is no way for my child to know. We don't say stuff like, we understand what that means. There's a bit of hyperbole, yes. Doesn't make it dishonest. So we can look at things in context. Understand what truth is being told. Like when I tell stories, one of the things that I will periodically remind people of is when I tell a story, I reserve the right, and I very often do when it's people that we might personally know, to change some details. I might make a he into a she. I might fold a couple of stories together, or omit a few facts, because my goal is to not violate anyone's privacy and to not damage anyone's reputation. And when I'm getting stories second-hand or third-hand, I don't want to tell a story about an individual as though it's true, and honestly, I don't know. I didn't get it right from the person. I'm getting it second-hand. And so I reserve the right to alter details to conceal the identity of the people I'm talking about, unless they themselves have both made it public and indicated that they don't mind it being disseminated. And so at different levels, like if I'm sitting down, I'm doing a mat chat, and it's a story that the people have also already told in the dojo, I'll repeat the story to dojo people, but I won't record it. I won't put it on audio, I won't put it on video and post it. And the reason I do that is at some later point in time, they might really prefer this wasn't out in general circulation. They didn't mind it being told to the people they were connected to. But they just don't want that in general circulation. They don't want their privacy violated that far. And so I do that. Now, does that make me dishonest? Well, if you think that every detail of every story must be exactly true, or someone's a liar, well then yes, I'm dishonest. If you understand, I'm telling the story for the principle in the story. You don't need to know who it was. The principle is important, not the person. And whether it's even a positive story and their identity is being held back for privacy, or whether it's a negative story and the detail of who it is being held back for the sake of the reputation. So I'm not guilty of gossip. I reserve that right. And so I let people know. So I'm very honest about the fact I'm not always entirely honest about the details of the stories I tell. I'm true to the principle being illustrated. But this is one of the ways you know that if I'm talking about you, if it's your story, that it's not going to show up in a lesson next week, but, oh, yeah, well, Joe over there, he did this terrible thing. Let me tell you what bad thing Joe did, because, it illustrates the point in my sermon. I'm not going to be sitting around in a prayer circle and say, oh, I have a prayer request. Because do you know what Sally did last week? Oh, we need to pray for her. Let me tell you. Where it's gossip disguised as a prayer request. I don't like to do that. And sometimes it's bizarre how gossip works, because I have some controversial positions. I say some controversial things. And it's in writing. It's in books. It's recorded on audios. It's posted in videos. If you want to know what I actually say, what I actually teach, you can look it up. And yet somehow when people want to gossip about me or attack me, they'll make up stories. I don't know why you have to do that. The armory is pretty full. The door's wide open. Just walk in, pick your weapon of choice, and attack me with it. But how many people have to make stuff up? Right now we're just finishing one of the most contentious elections I think we've ever had. I don't know all of them we've ever had, but of the ones I've seen, this is probably the worst of the ones I've seen. The thing I find bizarre is we have a candidate who says some terrible things that he actually says. The way I've described it is this is a candidate who is taking weapons and ammunition, he's throwing them into the enemy camp, and yet for whatever reason, and I don't understand this, his opposition is making up stories about him. They take what he actually said, which is frankly bad enough as it is, and then they misconstrue it to something that it isn't. And then the people who know what it is know, well, you're doing a straw man argument. That's not what he actually said. And what it does is it loses all power of persuasion for the people who know what he actually said. And he's giving you free weapons. He's arming you, and yet you're still not using the reality of what he gave you against them. You're making stuff up, and you're distorting stuff. I don't get that. So I just don't want to be doing that, because I don't know when the story gets to me, is it true or not? Even during this political season, I got in a debate that was, well, because it started off as a discussion, but it was turning kind of debating, which was easy enough to solve. It's like, well, let's go see if we can find the actual recording. And when we found the actual recording, because neither one of us had heard it, so it's like, well, rather than debate based upon what you heard, what I heard, and stuff, well, let's go find it for ourselves. And then you find out that what people are saying was said isn't what was said. And some of the stuff people say wasn't said, was said. Now, fortunately, in this day and age, we have more ability than ever to go actually find some of this information. But we also have more than ever the hyperbole and distortions flying at us as though it is the truth. So while truth allows for poetic language, truth allows for things like, are you telling me the true principle, and so you're not going to tell me the true details because you're not gossiping? Or you're going to talk about concepts, and you're going to illustrate the concepts with a story, but you don't want to violate someone's privacy with the story, so the names will be changed to protect the guilty, and the names will be changed to protect the privacy of the innocent. And I do that. And when you're dealing with honest people, honesty says you start off with the actual facts as far as you know them. Now, does that mean the people who are distorting the story are dishonest? And that's maybe yes, maybe no. The people who know the truth and run with the lie anyway, those people are dishonest. But the people who have only heard the lie and they think the lie is the truth, well, they're not being dishonest. Because, again, back to the first point, they're telling the truth as they know it. Just because it happens to not actually be the truth just means they're mistaken. You have to know it's wrong and pass it on as right for it to be dishonest. Which brings us to this next issue. How do you know? The simple question is huge. It's a question for us to ask ourselves. How do I know? How do I know what somebody did? How do I know? Even if I was there, and this is something, honestly, it's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for everybody. In fact, there's a reason why. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Even if I was there, even if I saw it, even if I heard it, did I see it right? Did I hear it right? Am I remembering it right? Eyewitness testimony, sometimes to certain details, can be very unreliable. That's why we like to have video. That's why we like to have audio, so we can go back and see it for ourselves. When we do depositions in legal cases, we get transcripts. And not only do we get transcripts, but say if I get deposed, if I'm the person being deposed, they'll give me a copy of the deposition transcript, and I get to go through it to see if the transcript is correct. Now, here's the thing about it. The transcript may have transcribed what I said, but it didn't get what I meant because I misspoke. That happens sometimes. You misspeak. And it gives you a chance to correct the record, so that way now the thing you spoke wrong doesn't become part of the court record as though, well, this is what this person said, it's absolutely must be true. And especially if you're doing like second-hand or third-hand information where it's, well, I know that, well, okay, I really don't know this. I heard this. This is what I was told. This is the information I was given, as I recall, which is different than this is true. And when you're dealing with legal proceedings, you have to sometimes be a little bit more careful with your language. So how do you know? Were you there? If you were there, do you remember it correctly? Were those the details you were paying attention to? And here's a big part about even if you were there. Did your preconception or your emotional reaction potentially shade your perception? And then there's more when you're dealing with some stuff. Even if you were there, even if I was the one interacting with someone, what is it I think I know? Do I think I know your motivation? Do I think I know your intention? Do I think I know your real reason why? And that when I'm dealing with some of these things, I have to really consider, okay, what do I know? And how do I know it? So it's like as casually as husbands or sometimes known for telling their wives, "You're just crazy." Well, I mean, do you mean that literally? I mean, did you have like a specific diagnosis you want to make of them? That they have a histrionic disorder? Or sometimes, I've heard women talk about, "Oh, he's a narcissist." Well, do you mean that like in a diagnostic sense? What is your basis for rendering this diagnosis? Do you believe you have enough information to diagnose this person? And you kind of think, okay, so is that what you know? Or do you know the facts that have led you to the conclusion? Is the conclusion the fact? Is the interpretation of the facts the fact? And sometimes this can be kind of tough to consider. And then, of course, how do others know? Because when we think about what we know and how do we know it, and is that really what we know? Or is that kind of how we interpret what we know? And do we even really know what we think we know? And so on and so forth. That we can be very, very honest, but still actually be somewhat uncertain of our facts. We can be very, very honest and still, for the most part, not really know. That we're saying what we believe is true, but what we believe is true is a conclusion drawn on an interpretation, drawn on a series of facts that we may or may not be remembering in the total context in which those facts took place. So if we understand that, well, then it's the same thing with other people. How do you know? And is this what you know for a fact, or is this what you know as an interpretation of facts, or is this a conclusion that you've drawn? And then a big one, of course, and how do we know, is did we see it for ourselves? Were we actually the ones that were there, or were we told by somebody else? And then when you start to get into secondhand information, am I taking conclusions as facts? Am I taking their recollection as the fact of what happened? If I saw a video of it and it was at variance with the story, could I see how the person might have been telling me the truth as they might have remembered it because of the part they remembered? Because they got triggered during one part on an emotion and they didn't hear the second part. Can that happen too? Yeah, that can happen too. It is something, an academic fact that can be looked up. What's the source? Is the source a factual source, an unbiased source, or perhaps a biased source that has an emotional interest, an ideological interest, a philosophical interest, a theological interest in a particular interpretation? So there's many potential issues to consider within the realm of being honest. So let's look at honest through the lens of logizomai. So to think, to intentionally focus your conscious mind to look at and ponder. Well, that's part of what we've been talking about. Think about it. Ponder it. Focus your conscious mind on what do we know here? Am I willing to judge someone as dishonest because my interpretation differs from their interpretation? And you begin to think about these things, and you look at some of these things. Now, to reckon something as honest, to ascribe honesty, to esteem honesty. Let me just assume you're being honest. Rather than assume that you're lying, let me assume that you're being honest. If you're being honest with me, but I still believe you're wrong, how could both of those be true? Well, they could both be true because you had every intention of doing what you said you were doing. You weren't lying to me when you said it. You just forgot. Now, stuff like this is so important because if I want to solve a problem, I must define the problem well. So as simple a thing as, if I'm going to borrow a video disc from my mother and say, "Oh, Mom, can you bring me the Pirates of the Caribbean Blu-ray?" And she says, oh, absolutely, sure, I'll bring that down to you the next time I see you. And then she shows up later today, and she doesn't have the disc. My mom lied. I can't trust anything she says ever. Well, maybe. Or if my mother is an honest woman, how is it the DVD is not here? The Blu-ray's not here? Could be, hypothetically, I guess it's possible, maybe she just forgot. Can honest people forget? Of course they can forget. Okay. So if I know that she's being honest, that she's willing to bring it down, she intends to bring it down, that's the plan right now. But we both know she might forget. What might be a better plan on her side is like, oh yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Text me Sunday morning to remind me to make sure it's already in the car. Or I could take the initiative myself and text her and say, just reminding you to bring the disc. Or we could agree to text and say, can you put that in the car right now? So that when you come down later in the week, it will already be there. And that's the kind of thing that I do because I know I'm going to forget. I know I get cognitive gruelty. My brain gets sidetracked. And so I do both sides. I will express to someone that email me, send me a message, send me a text, call and leave me a voicemail, because I don't expect to remember. I hope I'll remember, but if I forget, if I got distracted, then I need a reminder. And so I put the reminder on the other person, because they're the ones who want something, right? And then if I'm the one that wants something, I do the same. I put the reminder on myself, because I'm the one that wants it. And then that way I can treat other people as though they are honest, because I believe people, generally speaking, are honest. Not always, and not everyone, but generally. And that this helps me accommodate, I forgot. So you reckon something is honest. You reckon someone is honest. But that doesn't mean that the information is going to be correct. It doesn't mean that you have to decide who's telling the truth. It just means that I don't have any information one way or the other. Sometimes you get one person accused of something, well, are you saying my child's lying? It's like, no, what I'm saying is we don't have any evidence one way or the other. So if your child is telling the truth and the other child's lying, or that child's telling the truth and your child's lying, I have no way to know. I'm not calling anybody a liar, but I also don't have any way to know. Well, you should just trust my child. Kick the other child out of school on my child's word. And imagine that goes back and forth. Say two kids had a fight, and both of them blame the other one for assaulting them for no reason. And that if one's telling the truth and the other one's lying, that the target of the violence is the victim, and the perpetrator of the violence not only is going to be expelled from the school, but could go to juvenile hall for it. Do you just take that and say, well, he said, she said, and so everybody goes to jail? Of course not. You can't do that. But you can reckon, ascribe, esteem as honest, without necessarily having to determine someone else is lying. That I'm going to trust that you're being reasonably honest as you perceive the truth in this moment. I'm going to assume that you're trying to tell it to me. I might be incorrect. But think about how many liars just admit to lying when you call them on lying. How many truth tellers resent being called liars when they were telling you the truth? Is there much gain either way accusing someone of being a liar? Generally speaking, no. So you look at it like, okay, assuming you're telling me the truth, how can we verify this? Now, liars get terrified of evidence. Truth tellers love evidence. Truth tellers, if a truth teller, an honest person, finds out they were wrong, because say, you found the video, you found the audio, you looked it up in the book. An honest person, when they find out they're wrong, they are grateful to know the truth because they want to be speaking the truth. And when they find out, oh, what I was told he said isn't what he said. What I was told his position was when I looked it up in the book, that what isn't the actual position. What I was told was what the Bible's talking about. When we actually went to go find it in the Bible, we found it wasn't there. What I call sometimes the book of second opinions. It's not actually there. That's not what the Bible actually says. And you get stuff like that. But an honest person likes that, because they're okay. So before I say this to someone else tomorrow, now I have my facts straight. And for honest people, it's sometimes horrifying to realize they had the facts wrong. And that, oh my gosh, I've already talked about this, and I was wrong. You know, honest people, generally speaking, they don't mind if there was like some incidental stuff that they didn't get exactly correct. You know, okay, well that doesn't really matter one way or the other. But there's other stuff where, you know, the information I gave can result in a consequence. Even if the consequence is just a negative perception of somebody. And turned out I was wrong. That's not how that happened. I need to get my facts straight. And that they like that. Count. To count honesty. Count and value. Just a quick touch on these things in terms of honesty. And some people are like, yeah, you're a liar. It's like, well, suppose someone even lied. Does that mean they're a liar? Just because someone lies, are they a liar? Do honest people sometimes lie? In my experience, yes, they do. Sometimes honest people will lie. Sometimes honest people will lie for really good reasons. Someone's planning a surprise party. Well, honest people deceive. Yeah, because it's trying to do a surprise. So it's a deception for a good reason. Might an honest person, if there's a really, really emotional Aunt Mabel who is wearing this terrible, awful dress, and says, well, do you think I look pretty in this dress? Are you going to be honest and say, no, Aunt Mabel, everyone's right. You look like a stupid fat cow. You're not going to say that. Unless it says, no, Aunt Mabel, you look beautiful. Even if it's a lie. Why? Because you're trying to protect Aunt Mabel. So when you're looking at stuff, go, okay, what might motivate an honest person to lie? What might motivate an honest German to tell the SS, no, I don't have the Frank family hiding in my attic. I don't know where any Jews are being hidden. But we would look at something like that and go, okay, well, you know, of course, because in that one, if you tell the truth to the Nazis, they're going to come drag the family away and kill them. Okay, well, yeah, that might be, you know, something worth lying about. You're an undercover police officer. Might an undercover police officer lie about, oh, like who he is? You're going to go undercover and say, hi, just so you know, I'm an undercover police officer. I just play a drug dealer for my case. No, you're going to get killed. You have a case to do. And so we look at things like, okay, there's obviously some reasons we understand there would be reason to lie. But then when you get into some of the other fuzzier things, might someone lie just because they don't want to get in trouble? Might someone lie because they know someone will dramatically overreact? That someone, you know, what if you're on the street and there's a hopped up person wild-eyed with a gun pointed at you and they make a demand of you, and you know if you tell them the truth, they will shoot you. Tell them the truth? Or do you lie? Try to calm them down. In a much more common level, if you know your boss is going to rip into you for some mistake and they're going to be completely unreasonable about it, do you go volunteer the truth, or you just kind of quietly solve the problem and just not let them know whatever happened? That's what most employees do, if you can solve the problem. And one of the ways you can tell is if honest people don't come to me because they're afraid of my reaction, then maybe I need to look at my reactions. Because I might be motivating honest people to not want to talk to me. So one of the weird things some of those my students notice, and there was an incident where a couple of kids were horsing around in a way that I allow. And they kind of toppled into something. They ended up breaking a mirror. And then, you know, when I saw the mirror was broken, I shouted at the crowd, "Attention!" And not everyone came to attention. A bunch of people were still running around and playing. Well, the part they found curious is nobody was in trouble for the mirror. And the kids are still learning this because for some of them it's new. No one was in trouble for the mirror. And what I explained to them is when I allow you to play, and there is a normal and ordinary accident incident to what I allow, that's on me. I let you guys horse around. I let you guys play the way I let you guys play. Sometimes stuff gets broken. That's just the way it goes. It says, but when I shout attention, the rule is you stop now, and you snap to attention. It's like there was glass on the mat. Now, it turned out it was contained really close to the mirror, so no one was in any real danger, but we didn't know that yet. And so when I shout attention, and they found it interesting that they were in more trouble for not coming, boom, instantly to attention than they were for the broken mirror. And as I explained the principles at work there, not coming to attention was willful. They know the rule. And when I shout attention, it's not like they can't hear me. Because like this is my speaker's voice, and then sometimes when I'm just talking to people, this is the way I will normally talk, and what they call the inside voice. But then when I'm giving, but when I bark commands, it's attention, and it's sharp. People like put their fingers in their ears sometimes. You're not going to hear it on the audio or the video sometime, but one poor kid walked right past me just as I turned to shout, and like he's holding is like, ow, that hurt. So they hear me, and they disobeyed. But that is a safety-based command. People get hurt if you don't obey that command. And so they got reprimanded for that, but no one's in trouble for the mirror. They go, well, wait a minute. Because they're so used to the consequence being based upon the thing that got broken. But no, that's fine. That happens. And so when you're counting and accounting, what are you ascribing? What are you deciding? Why might someone be honest with you most of the time and hide stuff from you sometimes? Lie to you sometimes? What are they afraid of? Might they be willing to tell a more reasonable person? Might they be willing to tell a less judgmental person? Might they be willing to tell someone they trust more will not use this against them in the future? One of the reasons I know so many secrets is because I'm a lawyer, and so attorney-client privilege means I can't tell your secrets if you're telling me as your lawyer. Clergy parishioner secret, that there's a clergy privilege, and it's like if you confess something to me in what we call the sanctity of the confessional, even though we're not Catholic, we don't have an actual confessional, I am legally not permitted to reveal that. Unless I tell you up front that you have no right to confidentiality, that you have a reasonable expectation, and that a court of law cannot force me to tell. And so there's a lot of secrets I know that I don't tell because it's privileged information. But another big thing is people will tell me stuff because they know how non-judgmental I am. People will tell me stuff because in their experience, when they've done bad stuff, and they know they've done bad stuff, and they know I know they've done bad stuff, that it doesn't come up a year later, 2 years later, as a weapon to be used against them to judge them. And that they know that, okay, so not only am I safe right now, I'm not going to get judged right now, this isn't going to be a weapon a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And that I'm okay. It's safe. And so if you realize, okay, some people aren't being honest with me, is that on them or is that on me? Suppose, to assume a possibility, what if this person is being honest? How might that be possible? Because sometimes you might not want to reckon something as honest. Like I'll tell people sometimes, I am going to behave as though that's true. Just suppose, okay, well, what if they are being honest? Just suppose. Well, you're saying, well, what they said is true? No, I'm not saying what they say is true. That's suppose it's true. But suppose they're being honest. Well, I guess someone might have told them wrong. Ah. Is it possible someone told them wrong? Actually, yeah, I guess so. Well, is there a way you could find out? Is there a way you can just find out what the truth is, and without having to attack the person's character? To reason through the honesty, use logic, try to determine what kind of truth is the person telling. What is their ultimate objective here? To number, assign numbers, total, to compute, determine by calculation, and some of these things, and to calculate, to count over, all of these things related to, does the person usually tell me the truth? Are they pretty honest about most things? Might there be a reason they're dishonest about something? To deliberate, carefully weighed, studied, intentional. Just trusting the person's being honest, to carefully weigh what they're saying. To kind of study the subject of what they're saying. And saying, okay, of what this honest person is telling me, how much of what they're telling me is facts? How much of what they're telling me is interpretation of facts? How much of what they're telling me is a conclusion they've drawn based upon their interpretation of the facts? And of those facts, how do they know what the facts are? Maybe we should go look this up. Because if the facts are different, that could change the whole chain. And I'm going to deliberate that possibility. And let's look at it. Let's weigh this out. Like, okay, is that really the proper interpretation of the facts? Or is it possible something else is also an acceptable interpretation of the exact same facts? You know, and related to that, one time someone went to my dad and said that my mother was cheating on him. You know, well, what makes you think that? I saw her having lunch with a guy. Now imagine, for whatever reason, having lunch with a guy means you're cheating. Now, as it turned out, my dad already knew that she was having lunch with his friend John Bueno because they were doing business together, and they met at the Verona Casino because that was one of their clients, and they had lunch together. And so, like, it wasn't a surprise, but it was just curious how the person drew a conclusion based upon the fact of lunch. Now, the lunch fact was true, but the interpretation and the conclusion drawn from the lunch fact was quite a leap. So you can deliberate these, consider these things. Think carefully about it, reflect on it. Make allowances for things. And by the way, when you find a genuinely honest person consistently tends to interpret things a certain way, then that lets you know to be prepared whenever this honest person is telling you stories that bear on their particular ideology, that they might be being honest with you, but they have a tendency to kind of see things that way as opposed to this way. I mean, even a simpler thing is, are there some people who see things in terms of spiritual warfare, and what they see, say if you're trying to get to church, and stuff distracts you, is that you're allowing yourself to be distracted? Or is it, oh, Satan's coming against me and just stopping me from getting to church? Is Satan trying to stop you from getting to church? Or is that a conclusion drawn as an interpretation of the fact that you're not making it to church? Or whether someone drew the other kind of, oh, God just doesn't want me to be at church. There must be something God's trying to keep me from hearing. Is that true? Don't know. Or is that a conclusion based on an interpretation, based upon the fact you didn't make it to church? So consider things. Understand that, like, some people might be prone toward one type of interpretation as opposed to another. To meditate on, to deeply contemplate many aspects of, and to dwell upon. I genuinely presume that people are being honest with me. And that if what they say is wrong, I genuinely assume that they are mistaken about it. That what they're telling me is really how they see it, but that they're wrong. And so I will discuss the issue with them from the point of view that I believe they're mistaken about something, not that you're lying. Because I find you don't really get very far with your lying, even if you think they are lying. If someone has a history, then you even look at, okay, given their history, what is their pattern? Do I have to judge somebody as fundamentally dishonest? Not necessarily. Sometimes that's actually helpful. if someone is like pathological in the level of lying. And I've met very, very few people who do that. There are some that whether to tell the truth or tell the lie just basically depends on what's most self-serving. If the truth is self-serving, they'll tell you the truth. If the truth isn't self-serving, they'll skew the truth enough so it is self-serving. If nothing about the truth is self-serving, they will outright lie. I've met people like that. Not very many. So does it help me to assume that a lot of people are like that? No. I mean, it takes a lot of evidence for me to conclude that about somebody. And even then, I'm always open-minded that at some point they might decide, I need to be more honest. And I'm okay with that. And then there's like certain types of lies people tell. Like, one person where his consistent thing is he makes plans with you. Like big plans. We'll go on a cruise. We'll go to the South Pacific. We'll go to Europe. And then just doesn't follow through. And so you understand, okay, about certain types of things, we know he doesn't mean it. We'll know he means it when it actually happens. For some people, it's about their intentions. For some people, it's about certain types of things that happen. It's just how some people work. To judge, to form an opinion, draw a conclusion. And as I said, it takes a lot for me to form an opinion that people are dishonest. That's a lot. I might more quickly assume that someone has a tendency to interpret things one way as opposed to another because they have an ideological frame that they filter things through. It's what we call a filter. Someone's reading your autobiography into something. And that they don't see the facts. What they see is their interpretation, not the information. Or what they see is their conclusion, not even how they're interpreting facts to draw that conclusion. It takes a lot for me to form an opinion about somebody being dishonest, but it doesn't take a lot for me to begin to try to discern, okay, what is their natural bias? How does their filter affect how they see things? And work from there. To determine, to investigate and decide to settle, to cause, or to affect. A lot of times when you're dealing with honest people, an easy way to see how honest somebody is when they're willing to have things looked at. It's like, well, let's check it out. Let's test it. Let's find the video. Let's go on the mat and let's actually try the technique. And then to decide, to cut off other options to conclude or to choose. And of course, we're not going to do it, but you could run back through august, venerable, revered, of great dignity, honorable, and grave. And run those things through the logizomai lens of think, reckon, count, account, suppose, reason, number, compute, calculate, count over, deliberate, consider, meditate on, judge, determine, decide. To really think your way through things of great dignity, the timeless things, the eternal things, and really weigh these things. Spend some time dwelling upon them. It can honestly be a pretty cool experience. Now, as I'm speaking right now, I am a 9th degree black belt in my particular martial art. And one of the things about martial arts, and not as much with my style because it's a younger style, but even then a lot of the techniques bear out across generations. And much more dramatically for people who do ancient styles. Styles that were founded in the 1800s, or styles that were founded in the 1600s, or styles that have roots from way before then. That there's a connection to history. There's the timelessness, the veneration of things. That maybe society has changed around the art, but the art hasn't changed, and that we can connect with old things. Venerated things, honorable things. In warriorship, learning how to be a guardian, one of the things we need to be able to do is keep our wits about us. When things are going crazy around us, in the middle of danger, still be able to be focused and clear-headed enough to be a protector. In the middle of emotion, to be able to disconnect from the emotion enough even disconnecting, physically leaving the situation, so that we don't become the aggressor. We don't become a bad guy in the equation. And all of these things that we can get at with great dignity, being sober-minded, and think about the things that we do revere. And think on these things. Philippians 4:8, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Thank you.